We welcome you all back to Truth to Tell, Community Connections. I'm Michelle Ali Marati.
And I'm Andy Driscoll. And welcome to this fourth in our Community Connections series of live shows. This month we're gathering community members here at North Hennepin Community College in the northwest suburb of Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, to talk immigration. And we're very much appreciative of the work and cooperation of our community partners, who are, and not only tonight's host, North Hennepin Community College itself, and Kirsten Fabozzi, but also its Minskew colleague down the street, Hennepin Technical Institute or College, which they call it college now. And Kim Chow No, who was with us there, and as well as the African Career Education Resource, or ACER, the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, the Minnesota Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans, as well as White House and Mesa Latina, and the Somali Action Alliance, along with Local 26 of SEIU. We were hoping to get a few more people in the audience tonight from all of these organizations, but it is definitely session toward the end of the Capitol session right now. And so legislation is holding back all of these wonderful activists who are up there trying to get important legislation passed. Legislation that we will talk about tonight. And so we hope that this will be a timely conversation, both live and in-person audiences. A bit later, we may ask some of our live audience to join in the discussion, but right now, stick with us. We're going to be talking about immigration with some really important cogs and key people in this business of immigration around the state of Minnesota. But right now, let's first bring you some of the faces and voices of some of the new Americans in a short video that was produced by our colleagues, John Aker and Beth Piloff.
Hi, I'm Michelle Ali Marati with Truth to Tell Community Connections, and it's May Day, May 1st, and we're here in downtown St. Paul at the Central Presbyterian Church for a workers' march for undocumented workers fighting for policy reform. And we're going to hear some personal stories a little later, but we're about to start marching with these folks in the snow, so stay with us.
A lot of people use the word illegal to describe people like myself who have no proper documentation. But no human being is illegal. Undocumented, however, yes, I used to not have a social security number. I used to not have a driver's license. I used to not have a work authorization card. That's what it really means to be undocumented.
Somos familias que contribuyen, solamente seres humanos buscando oportunidades para nosotros y nuestros hijos.
We're contributing families, and all that we want is a better life for us and our children.
I knew that education was, in a way, my safe haven, so that one day, if immigration reform happened, I'd be prepared to take a very good job.
If I was just legal in the U.S., then, I'm sure I would have been an RN by now, probably would be in medical school.
I discovered that social work is about social justice. It's about, advocating for people and radical change within the system. And so when I found that, I just knew that social work was the profession for me. Given that undocumented immigrants do not qualify for financial aid, I knew that it was either going to be through working or private scholarships or my family.
Community college, it's very limited to how much I can afford on my own. So it's taking me a lot longer.
Let's move, comrades. Let's go forward together.
I was in jail for 2 weeks. I was just being put on hold while, I saw a judge to see what was going to happen with my immigration. And for me, that was enough. I'll just leave if they want me to leave and, use my education, like Obama said, in my country, or what by paper is considered my country. I consider myself an American. I wanted to join the military here, couldn't. I grew up here. I know very little of Mexico.
Over the last few years, I've seen the immigration debate grow from only those worthy individuals who have a bachelor's and who may have a master's. And now it's about the unification of families and retaining family systems, because worthy immigrants are not in a vacuum. We are part of systems. And so to move that dialogue from the low income, the low skilled worker to, hey, everybody benefits from immigration reform.
There's a bill called Uniting American Families Act. It's there to amend immigration reform to include LGBT citizens being able to sponsor their partners or spouses. That's mostly what I'm involved in. Unless you're Native American, we're all foreigners. If your family came here 10 generations ago, hey, good for you that you didn't have to go through this. Like, if your family would have come here now, there would have been that process.
So we've just heard from Daniel and Luis and some of their personal experiences, and now we want to get into some of the policy reform that's coming up in the Minnesota legislature. So we'll turn to our panel up next on Truth to Tell Community Connections.
And thank you, Michelle, very much. And again, thanks to John Aker and Beth Piloff for capturing those pictures and those comments and all the excitement on May Day when they were marching from Central Presbyterian Church in downtown St. Paul all the way up to the Capitol to hopefully push for the Minnesota DREAM Act's completion. And I think by that time the Senate had already passed it. And they were looking for the House to do the same. And then, of course, driver's licenses for undocumented workers. We'll hear much more about that as we go along. Well, nothing like an election to bring many key issues into sharp relief. And that is exactly what happened last November. Things are still not all roses and lollipops for the vast number of immigrants and refugees who have entered the country and come to Minnesota for any number of reasons. Believing even in the face of hostile forces of government and law enforcement, and yes, other communities facing economic pressures, still, many immigrants are still finding the politics shifting and some attitudes softening as new regimes discover the power in sheer numbers and the political suasion those numbers represent at the polls. Voters. Each group of Minnesotans is finding its way to acceptance. And yes, citizenship, but immigration reform may have hit some snags at the federal level. We'll hear more about that a little later. We'll talk about those tonight, and it's funny how an event like the Boston Marathon can change some heads. It's too bad because people can exploit that. But we'll talk about those tonight, and we'll explore the paths taken and the barriers encountered in the struggle for recognition and respect all of us deserve as human beings. So, as Michelle said in the video, let's meet tonight's panelists. First, to my immediate left, jumping right in to help us with filling in for Jovita Francisco Morales. is Josefina Catalan, who's one of my colleagues at KFAI, among other things, but active in Mujeres and Liderazgos.
That's right.
Okay, and what else?
Well, I'm a Kaupuli Quetzalcoatlique dancer,
Oh, are you?
Yes, I
You're
am.
Wonderful. Yeah, great.
and I'm also a PPNA at Latino Advisory Committee.
Okay.
Getting involved with the community is really important.
Are you tied into Mesa Latina like as Jovita?
Well, I'm involved with Mujeres en Liderazgo.
Okay, so they're all sort of tied together, aren't they?
It's a coalition.
Oh, coalition. There
Yes.
you go. That's how we like it. All right. Anything else?
Well, I'm involved in KFAI, La Voz del Pueblo.
There it is, La Voz de Pueblo. We wanted you to promote your show.
Oh, yes.
That's what we wanted to do. Okay, and when can people hear La Voz de Pueblo?
Well, it's on Sundays at noon.
Sundays at noon.
Yes.
And our show is on 9 o'clock Monday mornings. So we're going to have to trade times, get you back on our show one of these days. How's that?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much for stepping in, Josefina. We'd enjoy having you very much.
Thank you.
Next.
Next, we also have with us Sia Her. She is the executive director of the Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans, and it's an umbrella group for all Asians and Pacific Islanders living in the state. And Sia, welcome to you. Glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm more than honored to be here.
You're very nice to come, Sia. Okay.
And we also have Hashi Shafi. He's the executive director of Somali Action Alliance. Hashi, welcome to you.
Thank you.
And finally, probably the most active of all legal advocates for Minnesota's immigration populations, even as hundreds of other lawyers around here are working on behalf of those facing issues, is John Keller. John is executive director of the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota. And John, it's always great to have you with us.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
It should be noted that we worked with our friends at ACER, or the African Advocacy Group here in Brooklyn Park, but and probably the Liberian community, but unfortunately, no one was available to join us tonight from those communities. So I'm sorry, but hey, Minnesota's just bursting with diversity, is it not? Okay.
To start off the conversation, we'd like each of our panelists this evening to talk about some of the unique issues facing their representative populations. So let's begin by asking each panelist for at least list a few, if not all, of those issues endemic to their constituency groups. And let's begin with Sia. Talk to us about the burning issues among many Asian Pacific groups that form your constituency.
And Sia, congratulations on your new selection as the executive director of the Minnesota Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans, which means that you're sort of thrown from the frying pan into the fire here. But still, we'd like to know, what are some of the issues? I mean, you've got a multiplicity of constituencies under your umbrella over there. So talk about those, would you?
Sure. First of all, let me thank you for the words of congratulations. Yes, so I am about 2 months into my position as executive director at the Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans. And for those of you who do not know about the council, this is a state agency that was created in 1985 and represents represents individuals and communities from well over 42 countries from the part of the world we know as Asia. So that's anywhere east of Afghanistan and Pakistan to Japan, down to the Samoan Islands, and up to some of the countries we know as Kazakhstan. So it's that entire population that the council seeks to represent.
Oh, really? Kazakhstan too, eh? Oh boy. Okay.
Yes.
One's on the cusp.
Right, but the major communities that are under the jurisdiction of the Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans includes the Hmong community. Minnesota is home to the second largest Hmong community in the country. We also have a significant number of community members from the Asian Indian community, the Chinese, the Filipino, the Laotians, the Cambodians. And so in me just naming some of these ethnic community groups, communities that we represent, you can, if you know anything about some of these groups on the issue of immigration reform, we get a little bit of, how they got to the United States of America, whether that's as by refugee status or through family petitions. The Asian American and Pacific Islander community is concerned with several aspects of the immigration reform, the bill that's been proposed. But one of the key ones that we've spent the bulk of our time talking about is the family reunification aspect of the bill. And this is primarily having to do with the F4 and the F3 categories. And so
Could
the
you explain that just a little bit more,
Yes.
please? Yeah.
So F4, my understanding, is the category that's allocated to family members that are siblings of a U.S. citizen. And then F3 is a married child. Is that correct, John?
Families with one married child, is that it?
It's
John Keller.
The F3 category currently under immigration law is for children, adult children of U.S. citizens who are married. So the children are married. They've usually been waiting so long in the system that they've passed the age of 21, and some of them have gone on to get married. They're in a very slow process right now.
So it's concerning the issue of them being able to get here with their spouse. Is that?
Go ahead, Sia.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the concern is that with the Senate's bill, the bill that's been proposed by the Senate, the concern is that an increase of the F-1B visa, the H-1B visa will come at the expense of the family aspect of immigration. So that, with an increase of the H-1B visa, we're going to eliminate the F4 and the F3 categories.
Now the H-1PV, am I saying that?
H-1B.
H-1B.
B. Now that's the one that has to do with specialized trades, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So
exactly.
like computer
Right.
specialists and
Exactly.
engineers and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So the concern is that families are going to
Somehow remain separated because of the...
right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So family reunification is a big thing in the Asian community, isn't it?
It is. Asian families are not just the nuclear families. When we think about family from the Asian American perspective or just the Asian perspective, it's not just the mother, the father, and the two kids. It's generally, several more kids. It's the grandparents, it's the aunts and uncles. The Asian perspective of the world is a very collectivist perspective, and so, even in America, the family is still a very, very key, plays a key role in the development of a family. So generally, kids are left with the grandparents. In the small businesses that line University Avenue, you see a whole family put all of their wealth together in order to establish and sustain that business. And so, this is just one of the examples of why family is so critical to the Asian American and Pacific Islander community as well. But also, we've been having lots of conversations around. Some people come to this country as immigrants, some come as refugees. Now, the Southeast Asian refugee community is huge in the state of Minnesota. Again, we are home to the second largest Hmong concentration in the United States, the third largest Laotian community.
Now, why did the Hmong come here very quickly?
Well, the Hmong came here
In
as
such great numbers, I mean.
Right. So the Hmong are refugees. They came to the United States after the fall of Laos to communism, after the secret war in Laos, and that's
The secret war being the one that the CIA conducted?
Right. What's known is called the Vietnam War. What's not known so much about it is the war that was fought in Laos in the Sin Quang province, where the Hmong were known to live. And so after Laos fell to communism in 1975, the Hmong escaped Laos, went into Thailand, and then went to were resettled in countries such as France, Australia, but the bulk of them resettled in the United States because of their relationship or the manner by which they entered into the secret war as American allies.
I see.
And so why did they end up here in Minnesota?
Well, Minnesota, several things. The opportunities here that exist for the families. And let me just make it very simple for the audience to understand. So my family arrived in California, and we lived there for about a decade. My parents heard much about the opportunities that existed here in the Midwest, for example, the jobs in the manufacturing industry. My parents heard that you didn't need to have a master's degree in English in order to get a job, and my parents understood that they as parents had to acquire the means by which to provide roof over their children's head, food on the table, and clothes in order for them to be concerned about how well the kids were going to do in school. And so they relocated the family here because of the availability of jobs that didn't require English, because they'd heard much about the high quality of public education here. And so we moved here, and what we've heard in the course of our conversations with the community at large is that people came here for the very same reason, for opportunities and the quality of life here in Minnesota. But I do want to reference back to the question that you asked me, and that was about why family reunification is important for the Asian American community. When we look at various ethnic groups, our Asian Indian community, many of them came here with the H-1B visa. When we look at our Southeast Asian community, we know that they came here mostly as refugees. Now, the refugee community is of particular relevance to someone like me, because I myself came here as a refugee. And so with the elimination of the F4 and the F3 categories, the concern is that what if you're looking at a refugee family whereby, you know, all of the family members were have passed away during the war, or, you know, are for some reason no longer around, and the only surviving family member in the native country is a brother, is a married sibling. Okay. And now, you know, you have the opportunity to bring them over, or under the old immigration, the current immigration system, you can bring them over. But should the new one come into place and that family category be eliminated, well, the chances or all of the hopes and dreams of reuniting with that one sole existing living brother or sister may never come to fruition.
Well, so there's a lot of legislation pending around that. And
right.
Hashi, I'm going to ask you to very quickly, let me just ask you first, and then we're going to take a break and come back and we'll talk some more about that. And then we need to get, of course, to the Latino community, which is where hell is being raised all this month up at the legislature. So, but Hashi, this family situation is not unlike almost every other immigrant population. Isn't that right?
Not really, but we are very close to Hmong and Asian community. About family reunification is the big issue in this community, especially since September 11. The backlog of immigration, especially family reunification, was huge, and
family reunification is huge.
Yes, that's a big thing in the
back in Somalia for you, right?
Yes.
Well, and are you dealing with a lot of the same issues with this reform? I mean, the deal with Somali communities and a lot of the Asian Pacific communities, you have to actually get here. So there's this process of getting a visa before you can even be allowed into the country. Is it not?
Most Somalis came as a refugee status, so they came here as a refugee, but still their loved ones are back home in refugee camps in Kenya and Ethiopia and other neighboring countries in Somalia. But still we have tried to sponsor them and to join their loved ones in U.S., but unfortunately that has been backlog since September 11 happened.
So when we talk about this, I'm going to want to find out in just a few minutes what it was about Somalia that created the refugee status for so many of you. And of course, once again, Minnesota, it was really sort of a big central location for your. Why did you want to move here when it was in Africa, for heaven's sake? We have winters here, you know. We're going to be interesting to know why Somalis came here.
So we'll take a short.
Yes. Well, why don't we do that?
Short break.
Yeah, we can take our break
and we'll
now.
have more of our conversation when we return, and we'll get to questions and comments as well. And we're here at North Hennepin Community College. We'll hopefully get to perhaps the diciest part of our conversation when we get back, which is how these different immigrant groups feel about each other, and are the resources for too few. Are there too few resources for everyone to get what they want? So we'll discuss that and more when we get back, and we'll return here on Truth to Tell Community Connection. Stay with us.
You are watching Truth to Tell's Community Connection series.
Welcome back to Truth to Tell, Community Connections. I'm Michelle Ali Murati.
And I'm Andy Driscoll, and welcome again to all of you here in the Grand Hall at North Hennepin Community College's Center for Business and Technology, and more conversation to come around tonight's discussion on issues faced by Minnesota's immigrant communities. Excuse me. First, a quick word on our next live show. CivicMedia will take our 5th Truth to Tell Community Connections program up to the University of Minnesota at Duluth for an in-depth conversation on the highly controversial copper and nickel mining industry currently proposed for that area.
That show will air live the evening of Wednesday, June 12th on KFAI in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and it's also streamed online and other Northeastern independent radio stations, and it'll be repeating the following Monday morning in Truth to Tell's regular Monday morning slot at 9 a.m., and the televised version will air here in the cities on SPNN's Community Cable Channel 19 and Minneapolis MTN Channel 16. In cable there in Minneapolis.
Yeah, the entire state has a real stake in what's being called sulfide mining. Among the issues is the potential destruction of Native American crops of monoman or wild rice, that's the Ojibwe word for it, harvested for centuries by the Anishinaabe and Ojibwe tribes on lakes produced by 100-year-old treaties.
And the issues run deeper, though, and wider than many lakes and streams in the Iron Range. Many mining jobs could be considered at stake, and that part is what makes this a critical issue for residents of both northern Minnesota and all of us throughout the state. So check out our Facebook pages and our website for more information on that forum coming up on June 12th. And we'll get back to our conversation today.
We're going to return to our conversation now about immigration in the state of Minnesota and perhaps elsewhere. Fortunately, we have some great folks with us. We have John Keller of the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota. We have Josefina Catalan of Mujeres de Liderazgos, as well as KFAI's La Voz del Pueblo. We have Sia Her from the Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans, and Hashi Abdi of the Somali Action Alliance in Minneapolis.
Shafi, yeah.
Hashi Shafi. I call him Hashi. Oh, we all met him as Hashi Abdi, didn't we? Is it okay to call you Hashi Abdi? Okay. Hashi Shafi is his name now.
So, speaking of Hashi, we left off with you.
Yes, we left off with you.
And I'm just curious because we heard from Sia about issues with a lot of the Asian Pacific communities, and I'm just curious if you have some of the same problems with the visas and the categories of visas because of the fact that you've also got refugee status for a lot of your communities here. And will you be affected by these same changes that Sia has been talking about?
I think most of the immigrants, their stories are very connected. And especially the Somalis and the Hmong and mostly the Asian community are very close to their issues. Mm-hmm. Most Somalis came as a refugee status, as I said. There are some Somalis as well also who came as an asylee status.
Talk about that status?
Asylees. Mostly they came...
Asylees?
Asylum.
Asylum
seekers.
Political asylum.
But
political asylum.
Asylum seekers who came to this country as from somewhere, but asking asylum, and unfortunately some of them granted, and some of them never get no opportunity, and they stay in this country as a TPS, temporary protection status. They have to renew every year, and that's the way they have been staying for almost 20 and plus years, some of them. And unfortunately, but family reunification issue is the matter of most of the Somalis, something that almost every household, something they're experiencing. Because we left some of our loved ones in back home, and especially in refugee camps, to bring them down here with us. It's not going to be easy as it used to be before September 11.
Yes.
So those are the big issue for the community. But when it comes to visas, normally Somalis we don't send the visas, but except the marriage and mostly we use that family reunification issue as as a status.
And a lot of this happened because Somalia was, its government at the time was
collapsed.
Yes.
When the country had been collapsed back to 1990, December 1990, it was somehow we thought the country, the fight could happen, but the thing is going to come back together that quick. But it takes still now, at least the last year, last August was, last August or last October when the world at least recognized the first time the Somali government put together, at least the first Somali government of 20 years. That's what a recognized government existing now. There's many business is booming in Mogadishu and Somalia at large. Many Somali diaspora from the U.S., from Minnesota.
This is in Mogadishu. So
Mogadishu.
Is there some sense that with the way things have emerged in Mogadishu, that family reunification is more likely or not?
Not in. It's really. It still is mixed because we have the largest refugee camp. Largest complex of refugee camp is in Kenya called the Dadaab refugee camp.
Okay.
It hosts more than 500,000 Somalis who left their home for the civil war and also starvation and humanitarian crisis that happened in 2010. So those are the families that we mostly fight for last couple of years to join us. I know if the country get better, I'm sure they're going back to their country, but that takes even a long time. To send those millions back to Somalia, it's not going to be easy.
Okay. In a minute, I want you to explain a little bit about what you've encountered here now in terms of being refugee immigrants in the United States. But now I want to move to Josefina and John. But Josefina, talk about a little bit about what the Latino community has been looking for, especially this year and in the last couple of years, because obviously there is some hot legislation going on around the Latino voters, and now the state of Minnesota is considering these two major bills there, along with some other stuff.
Well, yes, there's, as you said, there's important situations about these laws that need to be improved, and they need to, like the immigration reform and also the family reunification. But I'm going to tell you, as KFAI, La Voz del Pueblo, and people, the programs that we have brought, and the people that are talking about in the show, what their concerns are.
Yes, please do.
Because people from Latin America come here to the United States with, we've been forced to move.
Oh, you've been forced to move.
Forced to move out of our countries because economic problems, the war, like El Salvador, Nicaragua, and many had to come to the United States. We're not in vacation, like many think that, or take jobs. We're here to work, be independent, be responsible. But those are the voices of the people that come to La Voz del Pueblo and talk about these concerns.
And what are you hearing is the answer to a lot of this? I mean, is it excuse me, pure acceptance, a pathway to citizenship? Is it the DREAM Act, where young children born here can either get themselves through school without being deported, or they can qualify for Minnesota residential tuition?
Yes, you said it. Well, the people that come here to the La Voz del Pueblo, their concerns are the driver's license, DREAM Act, immigration.
And what is it about driver's licenses? I was asking this Francisco the last time. What is it about driver's licenses that are so important?
Well, the driver's license is important for the community because of the access. The 8-digit.
Access.
The 8-digit.
Oh.
It's
the 8-digit number that we have on our driver's licenses?
Well, yes, we need to. Well, it's the Social Security, but also there's a problem of when the Twin Cities fall. It's the security concern. It was misled, and I believe that the people are when the E-Verify came through, and that affected the situation with the driver license.
Ah, okay.
So I want to point out, some of the differences here for Latinos in the community. I mean, if you are coming from overseas, you've most likely got some sort of paperwork to get here in the first place, right? Or you would have a lot of trouble getting into the country via the modes that you have to get here. But if you are a Latino, you can get here without documents, you can get into the country, and you can live here for quite a while without them, but then you are constantly living in fear of being deported or having some run-in with authorities, right? So I want to just kind of touch on the differences there, because you're here, you're working. In some cases, some people are paying taxes with the risk of, getting some backlash for even trying to contribute to their government system. Can we talk a little bit about that? And that seems like that's all tied in with getting a driver's license. That it shouldn't be just driver's licenses. You should have some sort of tax ID, some sort of way to be able to contribute, in the ways that people might say that your community isn't contributing.
The driver's license is a key.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a key.
And why is that?
It's a key because for economic purposes, driving, it's important, especially here in Minnesota. It's cold. And the access of having this driver license is for the work. Through that, we have employment, and we have people being more active. Mothers driving to school and having the opportunity of being involved in the community.
So at this point, your options are to either be limited by where you can get to via transit, or you have to try to drive illegally. It's basically what you're what you're faced with at this point, right?
Well, those are one of the points that we're going through. But if people think about when you go walking and you have to carry all your documents.
Yes. Yeah, and that's it. If the document doesn't contain a driver's license, then people are a little suspicious. Is that right?
Yes,
All
everybody.
right.
And so it's not just the actual act of driving, it's the fact that you have this one card that is your identification that you have with you at all times. Is that part of it?
Yes, because with the E-Verified, everybody's like, okay, she looks different. You got to be careful.
Getting
Who is
into
this
some
person?
of the controversies they had in Arizona.
It's driving while brown.
Oh, yes.
Yes, well, let's jump to John Keller here for just a moment. John, you've heard a lot of these discussions, and obviously much of what you do is to defend and work in behalf of these various immigrants groups and legislate for their, or lobby for their legislation.
Not legislate.
Yeah. You're next. I have a feeling a lot of people would like to see you run for office, man.
Not my family.
I suppose not, yeah.
Yeah, so I think just in terms of, maybe a couple seconds or minutes on the state issues percolating right now, Minnesota has two top line issues that are of importance, primarily to the Latino community, but also to immigrants from other countries that also might have lapsed in a student visa or a tourist visa. Maybe they came as part of a family group but didn't normalize their status. So the DREAM Act, the state-based DREAM Act, would allow for persons who don't have immigration status or who have deferred action under President Obama's action from last summer to pay in-state tuition and to have access to state financial aid. The estimate is that approximately 500 students would qualify. About 300 of them would probably be entitled to some level of financial aid. The Office of Higher Ed has said if we did this, it would reduce the total amount of aid to all students by $2. So to open up the access to education for high-performing Minnesota-educated kids, we have some clients who came at age 4 months who are more Minnesotan than I am, who don't know really anything about the country they were born in, who've been raised here, who've gone through school, and who even the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce says it's in the state's best interest to provide as many people access to higher education as possible. So that's the State DREAM Act. The other
I would
major
think that that's sort of a workforce development issue for
it's
them
a
too,
complete
isn't it?
workforce development.
Yeah.
You know, many folks are aging out as the baby boomers retire at ever increasing numbers year after year. We have a workforce shortage problem in Minnesota, just like the rest of the country. And you know, what we want to encourage is people who are able to get a good education, perform well. We know that they're going to turn into higher earners. They're going to support their families, and of course, they're going to pay a higher amount of taxes. So all of those things are all in the state's best interest. The second piece is driver's license, as Josefina was talking about. You know, a lot of people don't understand how difficult it is for people, even persons who have status, to maintain driving privileges. But for people who are undocumented, beginning in 2003, the state said, you cannot get a driver's license unless you can prove your immigration status. So what's important to understand is, prior to that, we gave driver's licenses out for the very purpose of driver's licenses, which is to ensure the safety of people on our roads, so that when we leave here, we have confidence that the cars that we encounter are going to be driven by people who've been forced to take a test, pass a test, and of course be licensed and get insurance. That was taken away in 2003, and what it does to persons who can't get that driver's license, who can't prove immigration status or whose status lapsed, is it forces them to have really difficult choices.
And I feel like that's the part that gets left out when people talk about this legislation. That, you know, even I thought that it was about the driving and the being able to get to work and feeling safe and doing that and carting around your family even, you know, if you need to get somewhere. But it's as much about that as it is about this idea of having just a simple mode of identification, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I want to make it really clear to viewers that the primary public purpose in extending driver's license to everybody who's operating a vehicle is all of our safety, first and foremost. The idea of the Department of Vehicle and Services and the Department of Public Safety is that their jurisdiction, their responsibility is to make sure that whoever is on our roads knows how to drive a car and has obtained insurance. So if we get in an accident, they're not going to flee the scene because maybe they fear they're going to be deported. The other piece about having no driver's licenses, even in the metro, is that some police officers will say, if I don't know who you are, I've got to bring you into the county jail, book you to prove your identity, and then many people are turned over to ICE, to immigration, and facing deportation, despite having committed no serious crimes or never even being convicted. So it is an interconnected set of systems, but if we focus just at the state level, the message that we'd like to get out is that everybody, not just immigrants, is safer if we require everybody to get a driver's license.
And because by requiring driver's licenses, you sort of push people into training how to drive, learning how to drive, following the rules, and that simply makes everything safer.
Well, and most people are extremely safe. They're probably safer drivers than those of us who have licenses because the risks are so high if you go through a red light, or if they're if you're like on my car. I hope no law enforcement is watching. If the driver's license light is out, a simple vehicle problem like that can sometimes lead to being transferred to ICE custody, and
that's already bad enough right there.
Yeah.
I mean,
So those are two major issues at the state level. We have great news on the DREAM Act. It passed the Minnesota Senate recently, and we're hopeful that it'll move towards conference committee, and the governor supports the DREAM Act. We're balanced right now here as we sit here Wednesday night, hopeful that we'll be able to move the driver's license bill equally.
Okay, now, so John, from your perch in the advocacy world, talk a little bit about how you see the immigrant picture having changed over all these years as it's evolved in terms of your workload, what you have to do. Talk a little bit about the ICML too. I mean, Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota.
So the Immigrant Law Center, for those who aren't familiar with it, we are the state's largest provider of legal representation for immigrants, even citizens who need to interact with the federal immigration system. We are basically a system of free attorneys for people who can't afford private attorneys. There is no right to government-paid counsel in the world of immigration, and so we exist to help people who...
Like a public defender,
there is
things
no,
like that. There is no
that's right.
such
There's no
animal,
public
right?
defender. Immigration is one of the most complicated areas of law. It's compared to the tax code. Those of us who just finished filing taxes last month know how easy that was.
Oh, did you do that? Oh.
Yes, I did. Yes. But the complexity for those of us who are native speakers to understand immigration is one thing. And then if you add, number one, many of our residents who come from other places have a deep skepticism, a well-earned skepticism of government in the first place. Government often is not your friend in places like Somalia or Laos or Vietnam, Salvador, other places where survival instinct depends on being wary. The second thing is that minor errors or minor omissions in immigration can also lead to losing status, maybe having your status lapse, or even in some circumstances, deportation. So it's complex. On the area of immigration law and reform, in terms of changes, we have come through a tremendous period, really since 1990, where the federal immigration laws have consistently moved to be punitive. We have made it easier to deport people. We've made it easier to exclude people from coming to the United States. And, you know, Hashi mentioned this with 9/11. We began to see dramatic changes in the way in which we even perceive and talk about immigrants, and those transferred into law. So there was a mixing of immigrant and terrorist, or immigrant and criminal, and the resulting legislation passed in the Patriot Act was the beginning of even further eroding of protections that we have. So this is the opportunity, you know, not to be dire or totally dire. We're poised also, beginning tomorrow, for the U.S. Senate to begin markup or deliberations on, in my 15 years of immigration practice, the most positive, comprehensive opportunity to reform immigration in a positive way. So
at the federal level.
At the federal level. All immigration is federal. Anything that's going to either create or take away legal status or benefits to non-citizens has to happen at the federal level.
So you've mentioned opportunities, and I'd like to talk a little bit about how folks can make any sort of impact on this. Like what can people do? What has been decided and what is still open to changes?
You know, first and foremost, anybody who's interested in learning more about it, immigration is a tremendous legacy in this country. You know, so beginning really looking at the very words on the Statue of Liberty, talking about ourselves as a nation of immigrants, it should inspire in us a desire to know more about the contributions of immigrants. I'd say really begin to educate yourselves. The second thing is look at what is proposed. You can look at a very brief overview of this bill. The main centerpiece of it is taking the estimated 11 million people who are in the U.S. who have no legal status today and creating a blueprint for them to come out of the shadows, to get legal documentation, to go through security and background checks, and to earn their path to citizenship over the next 13 years.
13 years seems like a long time, my friend.
I can say about that.
Yes, please.
I benefit from amnesty.
Oh, you do?
I came to the United States as an undocumented child when I was 3 years old.
Okay.
And it's a long wait to just be taking always, and it's late to have that process. Wait 13 years, it's a long time. Just for me to become a U.S. citizen, it was a long time. And
is this same sort of amnesty going to be required for Somalis and Asians as well? Is that kind of thing at all involved?
So two things I would say.
John Keller?
Yeah, the bill that exists right now is not in any way amnesty. It's important for the audience to understand that this is a bipartisan bill. It's not a perfect bill. If we were writing it, there would be a much faster path to citizenship.
Yeah.
What we do have is a bill that provides people documentation, the right to work, the right to travel and go home. Some people haven't been able to go home for 15 or 20 years that they've been here to see loved ones. and to eventually get their green cards at 10 years and citizenship at 13. So it's what in policy and bipartisan policy talks is an earned path to citizenship. You have to prove that you're contributing and making a step forward. The reality is that, on the other side of it, if we could have a shorter path, there are plenty of studies that show the sooner people become U.S. citizens, the more they actually are able to earn and contribute to the country. But again, we're looking at a bipartisan piece of legislation. The important takeaway, really, you referenced it earlier, Andy, is that beginning the day after the last presidential elections, you began to see a dramatic change in which you now see major conservative leaders as well as leaders of the Republican Party say, we have to figure out how to fix our broken immigration system. And that didn't exist on November 5th or November 6th.
It certainly didn't. But now let me ask you the hard question, though. Is the Boston Marathon having a negative impact on the sort of the momentum behind that immigration reform?
I say no, and I consume a lot of information, a lot of top-level talking points and ways in which this is described. I think the easiest thing for me to say is the persons who are pointing to Boston and the fact that, the two brothers who did this were not native-born citizens, even though they were here legally and they had gone through the legal process to be here, as a reason to delay immigration, were against immigration reform before Boston happened. This is a pretext to go back to the narrative that we can't do this, that we're not ready yet, that we have to build, a longer, taller wall, that we have to spend, another $18 billion in 2013 on enforcement. So the few voices who were opposed to this before the unfortunate incident in Boston are using the Boston incident. They are not the majority, and they are persons who I don't think represent the Republican Party or the conservative thought leaders.
Okay, well then let's talk about what about the future for the Somali community, Hashi, and then perhaps you can tell us what you're looking ahead to in terms of the work that you're doing for your community as well. Hashi?
In the Somali community, I think one of the great thing that will happen, that we're expecting to happen in this immigration reform, is the family reunification issue.
All right.
Which we have been struggling for a long time now.
So does that require an expansion of a particular kind of visa for you, or
not really,
or for your community?
Not really. All right. So what do you expect to see out of the law?
We're expecting two things. One will be those people who stay in this country, TBS, temporary protection status, will get access for. They will be part of those other immigrant communities who are also expecting to be path to citizenship. Either sometime may take long, sometime could be even shorter than that. The other expectation is at least our families who we left in refugee camps in Africa could join us easily, as we expected them to happen at least under this new immigration reform. Normally, since before September 11, the process was so easier. If I apply my families to join me, it was that quick, year or two. But now I know families who have been waiting last 10 years and still their families never joined them to come to US. So those things hopefully is going to be easier than we expected. The other issue, also the immigration issue, will going to make easier will be the money transfer issue. How the Somalis have struggling lately about family reunification issue and about money transfer issue.
I do have one quick question. So now I see now that the Somali community and the East African community in general is really sort of getting a political clause in local elections. You've denied a couple of, at least one, maybe two Minneapolis City Council incumbents their endorsement because you've been able to organize. Now, you've certainly learned how to do the hard work of political organization around here.
Since 2002, my organization, we have been doing voter engagement and civic engagement and electoral organizing and how people organize the issues affecting their lives. And electoral organizing was the center of our work. We have more than 20,000 Somali eligible voters data in our system. So of course, Somalis are social fabric of Minnesota, and we're part of Minnesotans.
Let's
We
jump
only
to
have
Sia.
about a
We only have
minute.
about a minute left.
Yeah.
Sia, quickly, please.
Sure, I'll try. I think the work that needs to be done inside and with the Asian American and Pacific Islander community is that for so long, immigration reform has been seen as a Latino issue. And so what we do know, though, as organizational leaders and just community leaders who are more knowledgeable about immigration reform, we know that this isn't just a Latino issue. We know that this is about family reunification. This is about a pathway to naturalization for a significant number of our community members. This is about deportations as well. And so we're looking forward to engaging more of our community members in the conversation.
Unfortunately, we
I'm
have
sorry.
to end it there.
We hate to see, sorry to say, we have to end it. So we have to say goodbye right away. But we want to thank you all. Hashi Shafi, Sia Her, Josefina Catalan, and John Keller. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
All right. Good night.